Chapter 5. The Tigra's a Wonderful Thing. There were two of them, dressed like deckhands in striped t-shirts with manticore across the front, black-bottomed slacks and soft shoes. As Bond turned, he did not see them as deckhands. He recognized the type. Hoodlums. Trained hoodlums. The kind the bad old KGB used way back then in their Boyevaya Grupa, their combat gangs that dispensed broken legs and bullets through the backs of heads. One stood 3 steps inside the stateroom, the other took 1 pace inside, moving behind and to his comrade's left. In the back of his mind, Bond baptized them. Tubbo Lard was 3 steps in, while Big Muscle was behind. "Come for the body, have you?" As he spoke, Bond feinted to the right, trying to bring Big Muscle forward. It had the desired effect, and he came fast as Bond jumped to his left, sticking out his right leg, catching the oncoming man's ankle. Momentum carried Big Muscle forward so that he landed at speed, head first against the foot of the bed. By this time, Bond had grappled with Tubbo Lard. A shorter, heavier, fatter version of the same species as Big Muscle, going close in and grasping with both hands at the man's left wrist, bringing his left knee up hard into the groin so that the thug gave a gurgle of pain and doubled over. Makes your eyes water, doesn't it? He jerked with all his strength on Tubbo Lard's left arm, heard the bone crack out of joint in the shoulder, ducked under the now useless arm, bringing it up to the middle of the man's back, bending him even further forward and hoping to blazes that there were not any more like him within earshot, because Tubbo Lard was now screaming with agony. Great schoolboy bellows of pain interspersed with Russian oaths. Bond positioned the man so that his head pointed directly at his partner, who had managed to get to his feet, dazed a little, but turning in on Bond as he grappled with the screaming, doubled-up, incapacitated assailant. He let go of the wrist, stepped back, and brought the hard leading edge of his right hand down in a heavy chop to the back of Tubbo Lard's neck. There was a woof of pain which seemed to come from deep within his victim, who crumpled up and would have collapsed onto the stateroom floor if Bond had not caught him by his belt and the neck of his t-shirt, using him as a battering ram, hurling the body headfirst directly at Big Muscle's face. The bullet head caught Big Muscle, covering a large amount of territory. The various crunches came, Bond thought, from nose, right cheekbone, and mouth. There was quite a lot of blood. There was also a loss of consciousness for both of them. "You should really try to stay ahead of the game," he muttered, turning and leaving the stateroom at speed. If this did concern the Tigre helicopter sitting on the pad, which was the stern of the French vessel, he would have little time to spare. Manticore was obviously operating with a skeleton crew, or some of her crew must be ashore, for there was nobody else on deck. Bond raced to the stern and pulled at the line which reached out to the motorboat he had seen on his way in. It took time to get the little craft inboard on the starboard side. Time and a lot of sweat. But eventually she was there, and he was able to slip down the ladder and jump into the cockpit. The engine started immediately, at the first try, and he swung the boat away from Manticore, pointed it in the direction of the French ship, opened the throttle to full power, and, with some relief, felt the craft leap forward and begin to bump across the water. As he came closer to the warship, he could make out the crowd gathering into a series of raked seats, which had been arranged facing the stern and the helicopter. The machine looked like a larger and more chunky version of the old Cheyenne, with a big, bulbous nose, a long, sleek cockpit canopy, and bigger stubby wings from which hung a very mixed bag of weapons. Rockets, mainly, though above the wing a couple of large caliber machine guns took care of any close-in firing. He should have thought about this sooner. The file had been on his desk before leaving for the evaluation in the field. The Tigre, still officially classified, France's advanced piece of flying hardware, was to be shown off to a load of bigwigs whom the French Navy were hosting at an all-expenses-paid junket in Monte Carlo. When he reached the side of the ship, Bond had to wait in line while two other tenders discharged officers and their wives. In the main, they were in uniform and were obviously naval or air attachés or visiting high-ranking diplomats. Finally, he climbed the ladder and flashed his official card at the young sub-lieutenant. "Commander Bond, Royal Navy Intelligence." He snapped, as though he would personally rip the nose off anyone who doubted him. The young officer did not even query him as he turned towards the quarterdeck and saluted. He was walking towards the stern, eyes everywhere, looking for Ms. Onatop and her admiral, but they seemed to have disappeared, or were out of view on the port side. On the helicopter pad, the Tigre's big engines started up, then were eased back into idle, the main rotor blades turning lazily as a ground crew member climbed down from the high canopy. He was about to find some way across when there was a familiar click from the public address system, and a voice began an official welcome. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin the demonstration of this extraordinary aircraft." The announcement was in French, rapidly repeated in English, German, and Italian. Discreetly, Bond moved through the invited guests and managed to find a seat on the very edge of the viewing platform as the commentary continued. "What you are going to see is a demonstration of Europe's addition to modern warfare. The first working prototype of the Tigre helicopter. Uniquely maneuverable, the Tigre helicopter not only uses the latest in stealth technology, but also it is the only helicopter to be hardened against all forms of electronic interference, radio jamming, and electromagnetic radiation. Now, the Tigre's test crew are ready. Let me introduce you to Lieutenant Commander Bernard Jabert and Lieutenant Francois Braus." The band struck up, those magnificent men in their flying machines, and two figures appeared from the crew room, which was obviously situated somewhere to their right on the port side. They were already in flight coveralls, with helmets in place, and when they came into Bond's line of vision as they reached the helicopter, he felt a lurch of recognition. The pilot was slightly built, but he could identify the walk anywhere, the cat-like tread of Xenia Onatop. There was a pause of maybe 3 seconds as the two figures swarmed up the ladder, taking them to the long domed canopy. They were about to settle into the cockpit and electronics station when Bond leaped to his feet and lunged forward, heading straight towards the helicopter. There were a couple of screams and some shouts. Bandsmen were scattered, and he had almost reached the edge of the pad before several brawny naval police grabbed him. "Stop them!" he yelled. "They're not your crew! Stop!" He was thrown to the deck, struggling, while the police held him down. He sucked in air and began to shout again, but was drowned out by the Tigra's engines. An officer had joined them and was mouthing something at him, but his hearing was blanked off by the thunder from the chopper. He threw one of his captors off and battled his way to his feet, still restrained by the other three, as he watched the machine take off, lifting very fast and then going into an almost impossible rate 5 turn, something you did not see helicopters do as a rule. There was a scatter of applause from the assembled dignitaries as the helicopter pointed its nose towards the sky and climbed with a speed that seemed to match some jet fighters. Then it fell away, doing a perfect Immelman turn. And at that moment, a white-faced naval policeman came running up, almost babbling at the officer. "They're dead!" He was breathless. "In the crew room, sir. The flight crew are dead. The lieutenant commander's been shot. Lieutenant Browse has had his throat cut." The officer looked around him as though he were searching for some way to reverse the facts he was hearing. In the distance, the engine noise of the Tigre was getting fainter. "You are part of some plot." He stubbed a finger into Bond's chest. "Who are you?" "Commander Bond, Royal Navy Intelligence. I was trying to warn you." "But who the hell?" "Janus," Bond mouthed, his eyes hard and his face set as though carved in hard stone. "The Russian Janus Crime Syndicate." So, the Janus Crime Syndicate. M raised an eyebrow and looked across her desk at Bond. M's office had changed beyond belief since Bond's old chief had retired. There was no rich smell of his pipe, no soft leather chairs, no hint of the old man's brilliant career in the Royal Navy. The new M had brought with her the sterility of the current technocracy. The furniture was almost a parody of high-tech office fittings. There was a Scandinavian influence, posture-improving chairs, her own chair, which was not a chair but something into which you appeared to contort your body. The black desk held no clutter, but for the very large computer monitor and a movable lamp, plus, naturally, several color-coded telephones. M glanced up at Bond and fixed him with a long, serious look. She wore a severe black business suit. Her hair was styled very short, almost a thin cap on her scalp. At her neck was one piece of jewelry, a single white-on-blue cameo brooch clasped high on her blouse. Looking at her eyes, Bond thought of the old joke about the bank manager with one glass eye. People could always tell which was the glass one because it was the eye that showed compassion. "So, you say Janus." She was all business, even brusque. "I think it follows, ma'am." A known Janus confidant, Ms. Onatop, a yacht belonging to a known Janus front, a disappearing American admiral, who you say is dead. I saw the body. He was very dead. It's a shade too pat for my liking. You mean Janus is a little ham-fisted, leaving their paw marks all over the place. Precisely. The yacht had long gone before any authorities could get near. Gone, Bond. Vanished, Bond, as though it had never been. But there is a harbor record that it was there. The criminal organizations of the new Russia are not known for their subtlety. Mom. She looked up at him as if to see whether he was being frivolous, but his face did not betray his thoughts. The woman could take nothing at face value. He found her constantly querying undeniable facts. Perhaps this was her background, for she was an analyst at heart, a wrangler, a detector of deceit through columns of figures. Since she had taken over, almost everyone within the service spoke of her as the evil queen of numbers. And many said she should have been assigned to the Inland Revenue Service's special office. Within 2 days of her appointment, Bill Tanner, the old M's faithful chief of staff, had almost resigned when his title was changed to senior analyst. Yes, indeed, the Tigra is a wonderful thing, and it also vanished from the face of the earth. Any ideas on that, Commander Bond? That's its function in life, Mom. The Tigra's entire purpose is to be invisible. Yes, but half the French Air Force were scrambled. Every tracking station was put on alert. Yes, about 20 minutes after it was stolen. I have my theory on how that little trick was accomplished. How? With what that thing carries, it can remain invisible except to the naked eye for up to 24 hours. I think the thieves simply put the chopper down in some deserted area, not difficult in the Alps, and camouflaged it, waiting until nightfall for the search to go cold. Then they simply took off again and did the trip in easy stages. M thought about this for some time, her brow wrinkled, fingers drumming on the desk. We've done all we can to track the thing. Every last piece of electronic listening and satellite surveillance has the profile. It can't hide forever. Bond wanted to say something like, "You want to bet?" but controlled his urge as she nodded, a gesture of terse dismissal. He was almost at the door when a sudden buzz on M's intercom slowed him down. "They found the helicopter! The Tigra!" Moneypenny sounded breathless. "They would like you to come down to the operations room as soon as possible. Mr. Tanner says it's somewhat urgent." "You go ahead, 007. M had already begun to busy herself at her desk. "I'll be down shortly." Typical, he thought, but acknowledged the instruction calmly. Where have they found the damn thing? He asked himself. His intuition told him that the operations room had unpleasant news in store, but he had no idea of how serious the situation would really turn out to be.